everyone. Welcome to another show of Keeping It Real. This time I have Jon with us, Jon Scarpa. In my conversation with Jon, I was really impressed with the structure of thought, what he brings to. I'm really eager to bring the wisdom and knowledge what Jon has to you guys. Jon is the director of IT at RD Abbott, and I'll actually let Jon talk to us a little bit about what he do at his role and talk to us a little bit about himself as well. Jon, love to have you on the show. Please introduce yourself to the crowd.
Sure. Hi, Adi and crowd. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate that. I love what AD Tech is doing, both in business and the community. It's really nice to see a company take that leadership position of not only providing services, but also providing a lot for the community out there. Anyways, my name is Jon Scarpa. I am the director of IT for RD Abbott. RD Abbott is a chemical and material sciences company. Our headquarters is currently in Garden Grove, California, and we also have manufacturing in Barberton, Ohio. What I do as director of IT is I oversee our IT operations. I report to our chief financial officer and then CEO after that. And again, thank you so much, Adi, for having me on your show. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Jon. When I'm talking to you, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the PPT framework, what you keep referring to, right? That's the first thing I would like to actually get started with. Talk to me about your PPT framework.
So for everyone listening, what Adi is referring to is really like I'll call it a moral compass in a way.
Hmm.
So I believe very much in following like mission statements of companies, as well as defining a mission statement for my department. And so one of our core values in our mission statement is that we follow a PPT framework. And what the PPT framework stands for is people, process, technology. And it's very specific in that order for a reason. See, one of the things that we always try to do in IT departments that I lead is we try to put the people first above everything else. Often there are other leaders that want to put like the solution or the technology first. Hey, we've got this amazing AI technology. Look what we can do with it. And I like to try to say, let's not try to find technology and then try to find a use for it. Let's try to actually talk to the people, try to understand what their real business problems are, how their processes operate within the business,
Hmm.
and then try to find technology solutions to meet those needs. So we
Hmm.
always put the people first. That's number one. Number two, we really focus on the process. So I want to get to know you as an individual and
Hmm.
how your process works, whether that's the purchasing process, whether that's the accounts payable process, whether that's the manufacturing process, customer service, whatever area in the business
Hmm.
that IT can help in. We want to get to know you as an individual first and then learn about your process, kind of work alongside you a little bit within that process so we understand it as well as we can. And then we want to try to take technology solutions that we're either aware of or we might reach out to partners. As example, a good partner to reach out to would be like AD Tech. So we might reach out to a partner and discuss the process and business problem with them and find out what solutions they may have available that would help with that process. So again, we're meeting with the people first, we're getting to know the people, we're trying to understand their process, understand where their pain points are,
Hmm.
and then find technology solutions to really focus on making that process overall better.
Okay, thank you. But again, with any organizational model or a mental model, when you're putting it to execution on the ground, you'll
Mhm.
face resistance from people. That's natural. Every change is hard. So, how did you navigate and implement this mental model at scale?
Yeah, absolutely. As Audie mentioned, change is one of those things that is hard at any level in any company.
Hmm.
But the reality is, IT are agents of change. I like to think of us as process engineers often.
Of course.
If there's one value that IT can add to any business, it is change that will increase revenue, decrease costs, and reduce mundane repetitive tasks.
Hmm.
So our job is to analyze processes and see how we can use leverage technology to improve those processes. As an agent of change, we know that people are naturally resistant to change,
Mhm.
and they're naturally not going to want to change their process
Yes,
unless they absolutely feel like it's necessary.
absolutely.
Some people will come to you and they say, look, I know my process is broken, or I know there's ways we can improve this process, but they may not 100% want to hear the exact solutions that you've provided to them.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how do you address this? It's challenging for sure, but one thing that you try to do is you try to break that change out using a process flow diagram,
Mhm.
and you try to make that change as clear as possible.
Mhm.
So, first thing to do is document their existing process as best as you can. You may ask the client for their own documentation. Do you have a flow chart? Do you have a business process
Business
procedure that
process.
you could
Mhm.
provide?
Mhm.
You want to analyze that as best as possible, and then you want to do a mock up
Mhm.
of
Yes.
what the new process might look like.
Mhm.
And I say might because you want to present that process in a way to them where you say, I've taken a lot of time to review your process and procedure. Thank you so
Yes.
much for providing me with
Mhm.
information to either create that, or thank you for providing me with your
Mhm.
pre-created process and procedure, depending on the customer situation. And then you want to say, and I have a proposed suggestions of ways I think we can use technology, way we can leverage technology to make your process better. But
Mhm.
know that these are suggestions, and know that this is
Right.
open to be
Yeah.
flexible and
Yes.
malleable to how you best see fit in your business.
Yes.
But here's my proposal.
Of course.
And so you present the customer with a proposal,
Mhm.
and you want to leave certain areas on that proposal open to their feedback and suggestions. And
Mhm.
it's really great if you can tweak the proposal or tweak the process flow a little bit during the conversation,
Of course.
and then ask them, oh, thank you for your feedback. Is this what you meant? And get clarification during those meetings.
That is smart. Thank you for walking us down. It feels like a very easy thing to do, but I think most of the times, with our ability to communicate value, especially in terms of process changes, is how you build trust.
Yes.
In those conversations only, that's when the parties actually understand, hey, you know what? This person is really interested in solving this problem. That's one of
Mhm.
the things. And I think you bring up a very valid point. How do you keep it slightly open-ended and encourage the conversations so that you're not just changing the system, you're changing the people around that as well. So much so you need to hear them, understand where they're going and what's happening in their own mind as well. When,
Adi, yeah, if I could add really
sure.
quick. So you brought up a really great word, and that's trust.
Hmm.
You need to build trust with your customer or client, whether that's an external client or in my case, like an internal client. Every department leader I work with, whether they are a C-level executive, another director, manager, or your process experts, your regular employees, I need to build a rapport and trust with every single individual in any room, in any conversation. I've got people on my team that will onboard new employees,
Hmm.
but I still make the effort after the onboarding process to reach out and have conversations with those employees, ask them how was their experience, how
Correct.
was their process, is there anything we can do
Yes.
to improve? Or
Yes.
when we're rolling out processes, I think it's extremely important and helpful to do regular check-ins.
Hmm.
I believe very much in an agile framework as well, meaning a lot of small changes in kind of rapid succession, but small changes over a period of time with a well thought out plan. But every time you make those small changes, you want to have little breaks where it's like you have a, a change that you've tested very well in test. You've gotten
Hmm.
everybody's buy off and approval in the testing process. Multiple departments, if it's a cross departmental project, have signed off on it. And
Hmm.
so you've gotten approval to move that test into your live environment.
Hmm.
Now you've moved it into your live environment, and you may want a week or two or however long it takes for kind of the dust to settle from that change.
Hmm.
Because even though you've tested many scenarios in your test environment, once
Completely.
that change goes live, you're going to run into things that you haven't tested before, and you're going to need to smooth out a little bit. But
Yes.
my point is, let that process breathe a little bit
Hmm.
by allowing that change to finish and take effect in the environment
Hmm.
before impacting more change.
Yeah.
And so you need to build strong relationships. You need
Hmm.
to have proven results.
Hmm.
And By doing both of those, you'll build trust among your community.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's a very important factor. One extension of this, while you're establishing this trust and kind of contributing, say, from IT to business goals,
Mhm,
it's very important that whatever changes you're making or whatever initiatives you're doing, how do you align them to your actual business goals? And how do you keep communicating this value to executives as well? Uh,
mhm.
how do you manage all of this?
I would say
Hmm.
one of the key things for anyone who's listening is when you get into IT. I got into IT in the early 90s.
Okay.
What I'll tell you is I started really as a programmer. I was a young person who just was totally in love with the programming world and the concepts. And so I was very much a bookworm because that was how you learned stuff back then. Not everything was online, and very much just experimenting on my own,
Yeah.
learning how to develop apps and then going
Yes.
to school for it.
Yes.
And so early in my career, the programmer mindset was just like, I just want to build like the coolest and best experience for my end user possible.
Hmm.
So I was always listening to the end user, but
Hmm.
I think it's important to understand that your product is not only serving your end users and the process itself, but it also needs to serve the entire company and the mission of the company.
Of course.
And I think you need to learn that. And that is only something I learned through experience.
Hmm.
And so my point to this is when you get into IT, a lot of us get into IT because we maybe love technology or we love change or we love process improvement, whatever the reason is that you fall into IT, but you have to learn the language of the business. And
Of course.
so what you have to understand about business is that in order for a company to be successful, they have to have a great product, great service, and customers that want to buy that product or
Right.
service, right? And the customer's always got to come first.
Hmm.
Along the line, you'll obviously, as part of business, develop a great supply chain for whatever your product is that you deliver,
Yep.
whether it's service or a good of some type that you're selling. Your supply chain or your assets become equally as valuable as serving the customer eventually, but customers got to come first.
Hmm.
So in business, what you have to understand is the way a business is measured by its success is off of how it's able to make a really effective product, how well it's able to sell that product and serve the customer, as well as how it's able to become profitable, bring in
Yes.
revenue,
Of course.
make sure that revenue is outweighing their cost of goods sold. And you need to understand things like EBITDA, net operating margin, kind of business language. Anyway, my point is once you start really understanding how the business works as a whole, that is when that's going to take your IT level from just the guy who knows how to fix things or program or make change to somebody who's really impacting the business in a positive way. Because
Absolutely.
you'll start understanding what are the objectives that I can accomplish
Hmm.
for the business that will help support making a better product, driving revenue,
Yes.
serving the customer, making our supply chain process better
Yep.
versus just developing something that's really cool and useful.
Yep.
All of that came before it is helpful to know, but it's got to be about serving the best interests of the business. Once you do that, you've cracked the code of how to talk to the executives and leadership within the business.
I think it's very important too, especially with the executive team. The alignment is strictly on the business goals.
Hmm.
Every division needs to contribute to those business goals. And as famous book The Goal says, the goal of any business is to make money, right? And you have to sustain, otherwise you're out of business. You have to close down your shop. So there is a thin line always between choosing technology advancements or doing major process improvements and versus contributing to the goals of the business as well, because it's a technology, it's a people investment, probably asset
Hmm.
investment in software, or even process also investment in operations. How do you really balance all of this when you say putting up a 2-year plan, right? Or even a
Yes.
major initiative? How do you balance all of this?
Yeah. For the audience, I'm sure most people may know this, but I'll just over explain. What Adi is referring to is a corporation will usually have quarterly goals that will roll up to like annual goals, and they will often have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. And within your own IT department,
Hmm.
you should be doing the same, right?
Of course.
And the plans that you create
Hmm.
should map and roll up and meet those company plans. So any plan that I make in IT, I need to make sure is supporting
Hmm.
our company's monthly, quarterly, and annual goals.
Hmm.
I shouldn't just be making a plan that doesn't support those goals. My plan needs to align with those business goals.
Yes.
So if I were to use an example where you might say, like, you're in a business that maybe sells a product to a customer or another business. It could be B2C, like business to consumer, or it could be B2B, like business to business. And maybe that's a product that you inventory or
Yes.
make. Whether you inventory it, meaning you bring it in or you drop ship it or you make it and manufacture it, you might have like issues with your supply chain. One of the corporate goals might be how to improve your delivery lead time to your customer.
Hmm.
And so you might be challenged with improving your delivery to your customer by improving the supply chain process, have more predictable lead times, being able to have the right on hand inventory or being able to get the right inventory from the right vendor at the right time,
Hmm.
just in time inventory cases. You might have an IT project where your project is to maybe lead like an evaluation process
Of
where
course.
you're evaluating what you're
Hmm.
currently doing, the
Yeah.
current tools you're using, and how those tools might measure up against other tools that are out there in the industry.
Hmm.
And so your like mini project might be the evaluation. Then your next project might be if a decision is made to implement a new technology, your next mini project might be
Yes.
to help assist with the implementation of that. So gather the right cross-functional teams,
Hmm.
make sure there's the proper training. So every project that you do that fits in your IT bucket needs to align to those higher level corporate objectives. And
Yes.
so again, the higher level corporate objective might be X. You're building smaller projects that support that higher level corporate objective.
To actually align at this level, you definitely need a lot of planning, of course. And
Mhm.
let me tell this to the audience. John is a very structured guy, extremely planned, which is something I've seen, the amount of prep work he puts in. But help me understand when you put a plan, such an extensive plan, and have the clarity on what you want to do when, technology landscape changes very fast, and it's very fast. And when things change, say in a span of 3 months, 6 months, how do you keep the flexibility and agility while you're actually planning and supporting these goals? What is that you have learned? Or if you want to take a example and talk about it, that'll be even great to hear.
Sure, sure. So Adi hit the nail on the head when he said you have to plan really well, but you also need to be flexible and adaptable because things will change. Our IT team, as an example, which I like to call it a team versus a department because I believe that we're a collaborative team and
Hmm.
our goal is to always work together, not only within our department, but within our kind of larger group of shared services and within the whole company. So I believe very much in teamwork to make the dream work. But anyways, to answer your question, you cannot plan for everything. You never will be able
Of
to.
course.
You want to have a solid foundation and you want that foundation at the highest level of your plan
Hmm.
to be based on objectives and not necessarily specific technologies.
Hmm.
And then at the lower levels, you start getting into the more detailed, like specific technologies. And those are the areas where you can choose to later, if needed, be a little bit flexible.
Hmm.
Let's take AI as example. That's a hot topic.
Yes, it is.
AI could take many forms. So AI, in my eyes, is obviously data mining and the ability to take data and make it more and more useful. And
Hmm.
AI is helping more with automation because it's intelligent automation. It's helping more in the areas of being able to create actual documents,
Hmm.
images. There's all sorts of generative AI out there. But a company today might be wondering, like, how am I going to use this AI technology?
Hmm.
And again, this is where PPT comes in. I'm going to say, first of all, don't take it from a perspective of needing to fit the technology into your
Into,
business. Think of it from the perspective of what challenges do my people have first that I
yes.
can possibly leverage this technology
Mm-hmm,
to help them with within their processes.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So again, coming back to those core principles. But my point is, what you're going to do when you plan is you're going to say, okay, one of our objectives might be we might have this automated order entry process, and it might be pretty good, but there's always room for improvement in a process. We're using some machine learning technology to have done this process in the past, but the AI has gotten so much better.
Of course.
So, how can we really improve and more like fully automate this process to where people are just having to deal more with the exceptions and the problems instead of having to do cursory review of everything? And to be perfectly clear, at this point, I don't think you should 100% trust AI or
Yeah.
technology like
Yeah.
blindly. I don't think anybody should do that.
Yeah.
I think in the technology field, we like to say it's turning doers into reviewers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more and more, the smarter the technology gets and you're able to score it. So a lot of AI technology that we've experimented with over the last couple of years, it gives you a score. How many times did you have to ask it for a revision? How many changes did you have to make on screen?
Yeah.
And it's tracking how good it is.
Mm-hmm.
So when we automate something, the more we see it getting 95, 96, 97, 98, 99.9% accurate, the more we're going to start turning it more fully on.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still going to maybe not have like individual transaction review, but we're still going to insist on like a higher level review. My point might be that long-term plan, sorry if this is a long answer to get to
No,
your
no, no.
point,
No, no. I think.
long-term plan is going to be leverage AI technology to enhance current automation processes to be more fully automated, to
Mhm.
require less review,
Yep.
right? Again,
Yep.
you should always have review. You always need
Of
some
course.
review, but improve that process might be like an end goal. And so you've stated the mission that you're trying to accomplish. You've talked to the people, you've gathered their inputs, you've gathered the process. Now as part, you've planned that out. Maybe let's say you've got a whole bunch of projects, and let's say that's one of your projects.
Mm-hmm.
So that project, maybe you don't get to touch until the fall of next year. Okay. Because I've got maybe demand planning to solve first.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I've got some manufacturing issues to solve first. And there's only so much time, so many people in the
Absolutely.
team. Maybe you've got a whole mess of challenges to solve. So maybe that last example I gave,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you don't get to solve that until Q3 or 4 of next year. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the time you've set aside to do it. And that's communicate corporate wide. This is the roadmap. These are the 12 things we're going to do next year, 3 per quarter. And this one happens to fall in the last quarter of next year.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I'm not going to pick the technology yet.
Yep.
We're going to continue to evaluate technology. I've gathered my process and my people and my knowledge and of the current process first. And
Mm-hmm.
I've made a charter and we're going to evaluate several solutions, build a budget,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're going to keep tabs on those solutions. And as those solutions improve or something else comes along that's perhaps better, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to leave room to amend the final detail. But
Yes.
we'll build our whole plan out with like maybe a front runner
Mm-hmm.
as the solution of choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, when we come to that point, we'll be like, is that still the front runner after we've been following the
Yep.
trends for a while? Or do we want to switch up that kind of lower level detail? Because the truth is, it's the process change that is the bigger change than the technology that
Technology
you're
is
going to use to change the
absolutely.
process. And it's
I-
the people who are
Mhm.
affected that are going to help you drive that process. You've got to support your people and your process first, then end up choosing the technology at that right time and place.
Absolutely. What I really liked when you said is when you change technology, it is actually changing the process most of the times, right?
Mhm.
No technology doesn't go unnoticed. But at the same time, multiple people might be affected or multiple teams might be affected or impacted because of the process change in terms of their systems, their processes, and their people, etc. So when you're running initiatives of this large, so take for example the AI thing you spoke about, say you're running a AI initiative within your company to optimize a demand planning process, right?
Yeah.
And it impacts left to right from procurement till probably like finance, right? How do you handle collaboration of this level? Because it's very important that all the heads in this understand what's going on,
Mhm.
and you really need to bring in a decent amount of collaboration and administrate and steer people towards something that believe that this is valuable for the company.
So I think it will be helpful if anyone doesn't understand corporate structure. I'll just speak to it for a moment. You generally have, we'll call it 3 to 4 kind of levels. So you have like your C-suite, or sometimes they might be presidents or VPs, but we'll call them your executive level.
Mm-hmm,
Then you'll have like your directors and managers. And to be honest, a lot of them will be, we'll call it a similar level.
mm-hmm,
And then you have your process experts that actually really deliver on the goods. And so I think it's really important to understand those levels. One thing I want to say is while the directors and managers in that middle level are responsible for driving the change in the organization,
mm-hmm.
you need executive sponsorship as a support to make sure that people understand that this is a corporate initiative and that this is something that really is being done to not just because we can. Don't do things just because you can or could. Do
Yeah.
things because you should. And so this isn't, oh, IT just wants to use technology to automate. It needs to be driven from a standpoint of senior leadership, your executive level, is driving this as a corporate initiative. So if you have a project, one of the best things that you can do is if you happen to be a manager or director and you report to a CFO, COO, a VP of operations, whatever it is, you make sure that you and them are on the same page and you're perfectly clear about the mission objectives. It's been
Yes.
communicated at the highest level and you have 100% full corporate buy-in and sponsorship. Okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
That's number one.
mm-hmm,
Number two, any good project has a good kickoff. You
mm-hmm.
want to get people excited about that project.
Of course.
You really want to rally the troops, and this kickoff should not only include yourself and your executive sponsor, but you might have other people that you're like co-partnering with on that project. So maybe that project is a supply chain project. If you're a director of IT, get the director of supply chain to co-kick off this project with you. So it shows that it's cross-functional and how excited we are about it. Get people pumped about this change and what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then lay out some expectations that, hey, we know change isn't easy. We know it's not always fun,
Yes.
but we're going to make this fun. We're going to take it a piece at a time, and we're going to work with each of you individually. You are our process experts, and we want to make sure that this process really helps you and makes your life and your day better. So
Mm-hmm.
kickoffs are important, getting people, and then regular communication via email on how the project is going is
Yes.
really going to help drive that project.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't communicate well, your project will never truly be successful. No matter how well it turns out,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't communicate your wins and your successes or even your problems,
Problems, risks.
people will see that.
Yes.
So even if there's like setbacks or problems, you need to openly communicate those. The
Of course.
more openly you communicate across companies, departments, with people, the more successful your projects will be, and the more you collaborate effectively with other leaders, that's really going to be your ultimate key to success in any project you work on.
Absolutely. I think it's a very practical way how we have approached it. I really like how you mentioned communication being a very important aspect. And how do you even seek help? With all of this, I want to go towards a last question for this discussion, probably the most hard topic again, which is generative AI.
Mhm.
Could you give us a perspective on how is generative AI is transforming industries like yours, if I may call it material sciences, and how is it currently impacting or causing what kind of interesting conversations you're having within your own organization?
Absolutely. First of all, with any process that you roll out, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's generative AI or not, you need to make sure you have a very structured approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to look at kind of your Six Sigma type of A3 process,
Yes.
which is what's your current state, what's the state that you want
You
to
want.
get to,
Mm-hmm.
what are your measurables, how do you measure,
Mm-hmm.
what does success look like, how do you measure your
Yes.
current state, how do you measure what success is, what do your trials look like, how do you test the process, how many kind of different ways could you try to solve the problem so that you at least have maybe a 7 good examples, because usually the first idea you think of is not the best.
Correct.
When you talk about something like generative AI, whether we realize it or not, there are certain pivotal points in technology. If you think of the 1920s, 1930s, going back an entire century,
Mm-hmm.
that's really the birth of computers before most of us were either alive or aware of it. Then you get into 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you start getting to like internal email communication systems.
Mm-hmm.
But it really isn't until the late 80s, early 90s that the internet is born and exposed to the world.
Yes.
That is a relatively long time frame,
Mm-hmm.
right? Obviously, for thousands of years before that, evolution of technology was a lot slower, but that's a longer time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once the internet became something,
Mainstream.
immediately we started seeing explosive technologies, web search, e-commerce,
E-commerce.
just the ability to have online maps.
Online.
It was just like the world changed overnight when the internet was invented.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, mobile, I think of the same way, right? That was another explosive technology
Yep.
where I remember having my first like BlackBerry that literally wasn't a phone. It was black and white only. And you basically were just getting email and text messages on it. And I just thought to myself, this is the future, right?
Yep.
And jokingly on like my personal email tagline, when I send something from my phone, I have a little thing that says sent from the
From
future.
Black. Sent from future. Okay.
Yeah, because they used to say sent from BlackBerry, right?
BlackBerry.
Or nowadays, a lot of them will say sent from my mobile or please excuse the typos, all that type of stuff. And
Yep.
so the joke I've carried for 25 years plus is sent from the future.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, you went from early Blackberries to your more modern smartphones or touchscreen. Obviously, BlackBerry came with their own touchscreen, but I'm talking iPhone, Android, and Windows Mobile, which really isn't a thing anymore. Now it's mostly iPhone and Android, but tablets, smartphones, that to me was like one of those next steps. So it was like early networking, early communications, birth of the internet, mobile. Some would argue the next big step was more the migration to cloud. And then I'm sure there's iterative steps in between that I'm missing, but big steps, AI is huge.
Huge.
I,
It's a leap.
I think a lot of people see it, and some people might think to themselves, oh, it's just an app that's going to help me take better notes or refine my code or help me reformat a document, help with
Yeah.
automation. Well, no,
It's
AI will change everything. Uh,
fundamentally.
And how do you get ready? How do you get prepared for that?
Yes.
Again, it's a technology, it's a tool, and we need to realize people and process will come first. And you've
Yes.
got to understand the needs of the business and then use those tools to improve the business, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Over time, that technology, though, will change everything. And I'm sure someday there will be something new. Obviously, robots have existed for a while. Who knows? Now, I don't want people to interpret that as like a fear thing. Like you shouldn't fear the technology. Every technology that's come along, people have just had to evolve and learn new skills. It's not about eliminating people or jobs. There will always be people. There will always be a need for people. At my company, a phrase that we use a lot, I've even used this previously, is our duty, our job in IT as like process engineers is to help automate mundane tasks
Mm-hmm.
and free people to do their best work.
Yes.
We want people to love the service and tools that we provide to them.
Absolutely.
We want to free them from having to do repetitive tasks
Yep.
so that they can do something better and more valuable, not only for the company, but for themselves,
Themselves, for the team. And I
for the
think that's how
team,
we
for
set up each
everyone.
other for success, right? The more interested you are around actually impacting the
Yep.
processes and, of
Yep.
course, people, that's when you set up each other
Yeah.
for success.
So when I think of AI, I think how can we leverage AI
Mm-hmm.
to make people smarter, faster, more capable, produce more, make them more productive, get more value out of them, make them feel better about stuff that they can accomplish leveraging that technology. But
Yep.
again, we've got to talk to the people, talk to the business, understand the challenges people face, the
Mm-hmm.
challenges the business faces. What are the core business objectives that the company is trying to accomplish in its quarterly, yearly, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year plans? And how are you going to leverage the technology such as AI or all the other exciting technology in our world to solve those problems and ultimately make those people more productive?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I enjoyed this conversation. I think we covered a range of topics, and I really like how clear and how thought-provoking you were when you brought up how to work across cross-functional teams and how do you buy in, or rather, how do you align yourself to corporate objectives. That was my favorite part. Thank you so much. Any last final thoughts you have before we close the show?
I just want to say to everybody listening, AD Tech is a great company. I've watched your guys' growth for a little bit, and I
Thank you.
see not only what you're doing with your customers and how well you service them, but how you're helping serve the community by doing stuff like this podcast. I think if there's one lesson we can all learn, it's about giving back.
Yep.
I've been privileged in my life to have the best mentors to work with. I learn from everybody, whether it's somebody working for me
Mm-hmm.
or with me, a warehouse employee, whoever, or bosses I've worked with. I've been fortunate to learn from others. I think the one thing we can all do is learn from each other. And so I just want to say thank you for allowing me on your podcast, for
Thank
speaking to
you.
me, and for the service that you're doing for the community. I really
Ple-
appreciate that.
Pleasure is mine. I really enjoyed this conversation. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you, gentlemen. I'll see you in the next episode of Keeping It Real again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.